brisket. Loved by many, mastered by very few. Now, I'm no master of brisket, but I've done enough where at least I feel comfortable posting this video for you guys. Now, to best understand it, a full packer brisket comes with two muscles in one piece. You have the flat that sits on top of a fat cap, which then sits on top of the point. Around your packer brisket, you will have additional fat, which is not to be confused with marbling, which is the intramuscular fat. Then sometimes on the tip, you'll have a cluster of dead blood cells that will need to be removed, and you may have additional burnt ends on the sides that will also need to be cut away. The burnt ends are sometimes caused by the manufacturing saws, which isn't too big of a deal. We just don't want to cook that and feed that to anyone. So to get started, you need to glove up and grab a sharp knife and start cutting away the fat from the flat side of the meat. Now, to better understand brisket, we need to know where it comes from. Brisket comes from the lower portion of the cow and spans across the left to the right side of the chest, meaning you can actually receive a left side brisket or a right side brisket. Now, why does any of this matter, you ask? It really doesn't. It's pointless information, but now you can make more brisket with a better understanding of where it comes from. Maybe even now you can impress your friends by saying, "Hey man, I bought a left side brisket today." In reality, they're going to tell you that they don't give a shit what side the brisket came from, and to just go ahead and cook them some brisket, because that's the real reason why they're even hanging out with you to begin with. Once you're content with all the fat that you've removed from the flat side, go ahead and flip it over, and it's time to attempt to split this thing. Highlighted in yellow here is marking out exactly where my point is sitting, which is sitting on top of the flat side, which is now highlighted in yellow. Now, in order to do this, we need to remove as much fat as we possibly can from the very top of the point and remove the fat on the edges. The very first thing that you should do is remove fat from the edges, exposing exactly where the point meets the fat cap and separates itself from the flat. Then what we're going to do is just remove as much of the hard fat that you can feel around the brisket, meaning that it's a really thick layer. Now, you'll want to go ahead and remove as much fat as you possibly can from the top side of the point by slowly removing it in layers, staying as close as you possibly can to the top side of the point, and don't remove too much meat. You'll see that I do remove some point meat from my brisket, which is okay. It just means that I'm successfully removing as much of the fat along the very top of the point as I possibly can. Now, in order to successfully find exactly where the point actually terminates into that fat cap, you'll want to go down one side of the point and just remove as much fat as you possibly can until you actually see the defined line of where you'll be able to tell the two different muscles. Right here, you can actually see where there's a difference between the fat and the point. Now that we have an exact location, we can work from one side of the brisket to the other, slowly removing the fat from the top of the point and working our way all the way down until we hit that fat cap. Now, the best method to do this is just go nice and slow, so then that way you don't make any sort of miscuts. Continue working all the way down until, whether you're cutting up or down with your knife, no matter what, you're pretty much just hitting fat. So right here is where we can go ahead and terminate that. Again, now that I have a nice defined line, I'm just going to work from one side of the brisket to the other until I've pretty much exposed the very end of the point meat all the way across the brisket. Alright, so now it's time to make one of the most risky cuts that you possibly can make at this point in stage, prepping your brisket. We want to go ahead and cut the point away from the fat cap. You'll want to start on the thinnest side of the point and cut along this line. Now be very careful as you cut this, pull up on your point and be sure to rest the point back down to make sure that you're on the right line. If you don't do this, then you could end up cutting into the fat or the point, which I did this once for my friend Tyler, and I'm pretty sure he's never forgiven me.
It's alright.
She went to bed.
He's always dissing my brisket. Continue to go ahead and pull up on the point and just make slow cuts. As you pull up on the point, you'll notice that the point, or I should say the fat cap, will go ahead and pretty much expose itself, giving you the line that you're supposed to cut along. This makes it a lot easier to make slow, accurate cuts while trying to separate these two pieces of meat. Now keep in mind that you want to pull and cut the point away from the fat cap. So right here, purposely, I made a mistake by cutting the fat away from the flat, which you do not want to do. If this does happen, be sure to go ahead and make a correction cut by cutting up into the fat like this until you find the point, and then go ahead and start pulling the point away from the fat, and you can correct yourself by making this simple correction and cuts. Now, if you guys haven't already, be sure to smash that like button and give me a subscribe. Help me grow my channel. Support me. I would greatly appreciate it. Helps me out. YouTube algorithm. You guys know the drill. I appreciate it. Thank you. Now, at the very end, it can be very difficult to make the final cut because it's just fat with a little bit of meat. So just go ahead and cut it and make your best judgment call. Oh yeah, we did it. Now the whole reason why you're cutting the point away from the actual flat meat is because we want to go ahead and leave at least a 1/4 inch of fat across the flat. In doing this, this is going to help us in protecting the flat, being that the flat is a drier piece of meat with less fat inside of it. If we leave this 1/4 inch of fat, we can lay and smoke the brisket, or the flat side of the brisket, on our smoker, fat side down. This is at least my preferred method, as it's a very controversial topic where some people do it fat side up and fat side down. Go ahead and cut a 1/4 inch layer though, so then that way your brisket lays nice and flat. Now when it comes to the point and trimming this guy up, there's no real science behind this. Just go ahead and cut away as much fat as you desire basically until you think that it looks good to you. Now, similar to the flat, cut away as much fat from the point as you possibly can, so then that way your point is at least laying flat. And now you should have something that looks like this.